Why, hello there. Welcome to A Fifth of Jack Gaming. And today we are reviewing Mr. Miracle. That's right. We have a deluxe copy that we ended up picking up. I know this came out just with an absolute, but we tend to not go down that rabbit hole because absolute's a little bit bigger, and then we'll start going down picking up other books, and before we know it, that rabbit hole has gotten dug deep and in a hurry. But either way, we're not going to be losing out too much because this is Mr. Miracle by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. And I have to say, this is a story that's ended up making me want to explore a little bit more into the fourth world. What's the fourth world? Well, that's something that Jack Kirby ended up making up, I guess. And it has a whole entire history. Maybe we'll cover that whenever we end up covering the fourth world. But without further ado, let's dive in and see what we have over with Mr. Miracle, the deluxe copy, and what you can expect. First off, we'll take off the dust cover. There's the cover itself, the spine, the back, flap one, talking about Tom King and Mitch Gerads, talking about the story of this. And now we're going to be going into a little bit spoilers. Yes, the book itself has a spoiler that's on the cover. That's why I'm going to end up saying that. And that's where we're going to end up covering it. So, you obviously have Scott Freeze, aka Mr. Miracle. The spine of Mr. Miracle. But here's a little spoiler. You got Darkseid with a wee little baby. But who is that little baby? Well, you'll have to read the story to find out. But before we end up diving in, you can go visit organicpricebooks.com. Use the discount code of Fifth of Jack to save $2 off. Or if you happen to have 4 or more books, you can use the code JACKIT to save 5% off your entire order instead. Orders of $30 or more ends up getting free shipping. So it's a nice, awesome way to help the channel and get some awesome books right over to be going on your shelf. Alright. Without further ado, let's switch it on over to the other camera, and we'll be able to show you the art where we'll end up having a nice voiceover in the process. Alright, let's do this now. Darkseid is. Alright, let's take this Eisner Award-winning Best Writer, Best Artist book, and let's dive in and see what's inside. Mr. Miracle, created by Jack Kirby. There we go. So right off the get-go, we get the origins of Scott Free, how he ended up becoming Mr. Miracle, where we ended up having Darkseid and Highfather making an agreement to trade sons to be able to make a parlay for not having war between one another. Highfather ended up getting Orin, and then also Darkseid ended up getting Scott Free, which ends up becoming Mr. Miracle. Mr. Miracle ends up getting raised by Granny Goodness. That's where he meets up with Big Bertha, and that's when the relationship starts to go up. Now, that catches us up to what we're going to be coming over to the main story of Mr. Miracle. Right off the cuff, we are faced with him trying to commit suicide and the repercussions that comes out of that. Then we also see Orion coming over, trying to teach, Scott a lesson. Well, I don't know how well that ends up going over. Then we find in conversation with Highfather that Darkseid ended up getting the anti-life equation, and that he already has it and possesses it. After having him do a little bit of training on escaping, we end up finding out Highfather has passed away, and both Mr. Scott and Big Bertha is required or asked to be coming back over to New Genesis because they believe Darkseid is responsible for it, and they're going to be trying to not have him be getting so much power and trying to defend it. After successfully ended up defending New Genesis, they end up coming back over, bathe, shower, and all of that to find out that Orion has taken up the role of Highfather. Eventually, we find both Bertha, or Big Bertha, and Scott coming back over, sitting down, meeting with Granny Goodness, and eventually that she ends up getting taken out in the process of that. In the process, taking out one of the bigger pawns from Darkseid's grasp. Eventually, we end up seeing where Orion and Scott end up coming back together, end up talking with one another, and Orion asks us if he's seen the face of a god, and then he proceeds to end up beating the crap out of Scott, trying to beat him to be seeing him as a new god. It's also important that during the process of all this going on, when they came back back to New Genesis, they ended up becoming both generals, General Barda and General Free. So all throughout this entire thing, they are generals of the forces of New Genesis. As the story progresses, we find out Ryan and other people of the New Genesis ended up coming together to a meeting where Scott Freeze ends up talking about the importance of a veggie tray. This will end up leading down to another astonishing moment that comes over into this story. In this meeting, we ended up finding Free finally ended up letting loose and landing Orion. Along in the process, Berta ends up becoming pregnant, and then we end up seeing a story continually going forward with that. Eventually, well, the baby ends up getting born, giving birth to a new god. During the moments of this, we end up having an interesting moment where we end up seeing a toy doll of Batman, where it says, in a direct quote, "Batman kills babies because of having toys in the crib." And then eventually ends up leaving Darkseid to leave the option of him giving the anti-life equation and ordering peace for a trade of his grandkid. We ended up seeing the veggie tray coming back in action where Darkseid goes over with it. And then eventually we end up seeing that Scott does agree to it, but there ends up being a surprise right here over at the end where he ends up making it and getting it part of Darkseid, and throughout the entire process of the fight, saving him and his family. And there's a little bit of surprise right at the end. Mr. Miracle. It's pretty amazing. I ended up loving. There's a couple Easter eggs I love reading into there, where it ends up having a different shirt that goes through the different universe. So you can see a Batman, Superman. You can see randomness that goes over with it. And it brings up the interesting questions of, would you be able to give up your kid to end a war? Well, I don't know if I'll be able to do that. And I like how he ends up trying to figure a way out with it. And in this book, he does get a bunch of moral questions, like I said with the question before, giving up the kid to end a war. Or you end up having a first-time father, stuff like that goes on. I do have to give a little heads up. I did do a little bit of editing of the entire voiceover area because they ended up being some kind of, well, more mature art, and I try to keep it a little bit safer with the kiddies. There might be a little bit more violence that's going to be found in here, but you'll end up seeing that if you end up picking up the book. Like I said, you can end up picking this up over at Price Books, but also I want to say that the Absolute has more extras that you can end up having, and Jake from Brave and the Boys ended up having an awesome interview with Tom King. So where he ended up actually talking about this Absolute, and actually he ended up having a nice breakdown of all the stuff of Tom King that goes over talking about Batman and any of those subjects because, well, Jake, I would say, is probably the biggest fan that I know of Tom King, so he had a nice breakdown with that. So I'll have a link down in the description down below of that interview. And we have a way to get Brave in the Boys' channel. This, I definitely is going to give it a 9 out of 10. It's a solid book, solid read, and it's a journey that, well, if you're a parent, it's going to hit a little bit home. If this is something that you end up liking, and if you like this kind of content, go ahead, hit that little subscribe button. While you're there, hit that little bell to be notified whenever we come out with new content. And if you definitely like this stuff, put a little like on there and let us know in the comments down below of what you end up thinking about it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later.